constitutional crisis if King Charles goes ahead with a meeting with Prince Harry.
Meghan Markle, Prince Archie, and Princess Lilibet are reuniting with King Charles right now in the UK.
What happened was I was told by somebody very close to Harry that he has accepted the King's kind offer.
King Charles couldn't put his hand in his pocket and say to his son, I've got you covered.
He wants to be taken as a serious person.
Princess Diana's memory alive. While attending Scotty's summer festival in the UK, the Duke of Sussex...
Buckingham Palace was not expected to say a word. The meeting was meant to stay private, held at a private home with no cameras, no statement, and no public record. But the palace broke its own silence and confirmed that King Charles had quietly hosted Prince Harry, Meghan, and their 2 children for the first time in 4 years. What makes this bigger than a family visit is the timing. While this reunion was happening in private, senior figures were also questioning whether Harry's ongoing role around the royal system was putting pressure on the monarchy in a way serious enough to raise fears of a constitutional crisis. So 2 stories were unfolding at once. A grandfather seeing his grandchildren, and an institution wondering how long it could keep its balance. The palace confirmed the meeting on a Friday in a short, tightly controlled statement. It revealed only that King Charles and Queen Camilla had hosted Harry, Meghan, Archie, and Lilibet that afternoon. There were no extra details, no schedule, no photos, and no further comment. The meeting took place at Highgrove House, and that matters. It was not held at Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle. Highgrove is Charles's private country home in Gloucestershire, not an official royal property. Choosing that setting clearly showed this was personal, not institutional.
First time in 4 years. Taking place in the English countryside, Prince Harry and his father put their differences aside.
The visit was handled as a private family matter, not a royal occasion, and every choice showed that. The palace statement left out key details, and more information appeared only later through carefully managed sources. Even confirmation that Queen Camilla was there came indirectly, showing how tightly the message was being controlled. Meghan and the children were already in Europe on vacation, so they did not fly in from Montecito just for this. The visit to Highgrove was a planned stop during that trip, suggesting it was a deliberate choice, not a last-minute convenience. The palace then drew a firm line. No photos would be released, and no more details would be shared. What happened inside the house was meant to stay private. From the start, the palace made clear that its brief statement was both the start and the end of what it wanted the public to know. That extreme brevity was intentional. The palace shared only enough to control the story and nothing more. And that raises the bigger question of what exactly it was trying to protect. 4 years is a long gap, especially for children. Archie and Lilibet had not been in the same room as their grandfather for 4 years. The last confirmed in-person meeting was in 2022. And that moment was already significant because it was the first time Charles had ever met his granddaughter, Lilibet.
Today, that King Charles and Queen Camilla hosted Prince Harry and Meghan Markle and the couple's 2 children this afternoon.
People close to the moment said it was deeply emotional, and that is easy to understand. When Harry stepped back from royal duties, Archie was still a baby, and Charles had barely had time to know him before distance of every kind made that harder. A relationship between a grandfather and his grandchildren does not wait for adult conflict to be resolved. It either grows or it fades. For 4 years, it did not grow. Archie and Lilibet are being raised in Montecito. Their life is in California, shaped by school, neighborhood routines, and the world their parents have built far from royal life. They are not growing up with a regular relationship with their grandfather, only whatever they are told about him. And that distance naturally grows with time. That is why reducing this reunion to Harry and Meghan's image, strategy, or public standing misses the heart of it. Beneath all the noise, this was a grandfather seeing his grandchildren for the first time in 4 years. That is the simplest truth, and the most important one. Charles is not young, and he has faced serious health problems. Time matters. For a while, it genuinely seemed that the long dispute over Harry's security concerns, whether justified or not, might delay this reunion again and again, possibly for good, so the fact that it finally happened matters. Whatever else surrounds it, those children were at last in the same room as their grandfather.
This is where Prince Harry's staying. Oh wait, just kidding. Not where Prince Harry's staying.
Isn't this a complete circus?
Yeah.
I don't know.
For Charles, the reunion clearly mattered. But the reasons it became so difficult are what make the wider story more serious. The key question is simple. If this was truly private, why did the palace confirm it at all? The most likely answer is also the clearest. News of a meeting this important was never going to stay hidden. Too many people were involved. Too many staff were around, and too many sources on different sides would have known something had happened. Sooner or later, someone would have noticed an arrival, mentioned a sighting, or spoken to a journalist. So the real issue was never whether the story would come out. It was who would tell it first. By announcing it themselves, the palace moved first and kept control. They chose the wording, the timing, and exactly how much the public would be told. One short, carefully shaped statement set a firm boundary between what was confirmed and what would remain private. That was not openness. It was careful message control, and it was effective. But the most important detail may have come before the meeting itself. According to sources, Harry personally assured King Charles that he would not speak publicly about what happened at Highgrove. No interviews, no comments, and no details quietly passed to friendly media. That promise matters because the fact that it had to be made says a great deal on its own.
Grandchildren, there's a big sleepover at Balmoral. They were invited to go to that. They were also invited.
The fact that silence reportedly had to be set as a condition, or at least a clear expectation, says a lot. Discretion was not taken for granted. It had to be agreed to in advance. That shows how little trust existed going into the meeting and how tightly everything was managed. The palace confirmed the visit happened. Harry, in return, reportedly agreed not to speak publicly about what was said inside Highgrove. Together, those two moves created an unspoken deal. The visit would be acknowledged, but nothing more would be shared. In that sense, it was not only a family reunion, it was also a carefully controlled arrangement. It also started a clock. A promise made in those circumstances by someone whose private world has often become public can only be trusted for so long. Everyone involved would have understood that. While this was happening at Highgrove, Prince William was at a charity polo match in Windsor. Princess Catherine was with him. It was a public event, photographed and reported, completely separate from the private meeting at Charles's country home. William was not there, and that was clearly intentional. No meeting was arranged between the brothers. No effort was made to bring them together. No conversation was floated, and not even a brief encounter appeared to be on the table. The rift between Harry and William has not eased. It remains exactly where it has been, and William's very public presence elsewhere made that clear without him saying a word. Some wanted to see the Highgrove meeting as the start of something bigger, a first move toward wider reconciliation.
Friction and more confusion. When it comes to Harry, Meghan, and the royal family, nothing is straightforward.
Any idea that this reunion marked the start of a wider family healing ended the moment William stayed away. What happened at Highgrove was narrow and personal, a grandfather spending an afternoon with his grandchildren in a private home. It was not a peace talk, and it did not mean the deeper family rifts were improving. Charles seeing Archie and Lilibet again did nothing to change the reality between his two sons. The split was made unmistakable by the way the day was arranged. The reunion on one side, William's public duties on the other. That separation was deliberate and impossible to miss. The meeting clearly meant a great deal to Charles. But that does not make it a turning point in the larger family story. Something can be deeply meaningful and still very limited. Both things were true at Highgrove. Charles got an important personal moment, and the divide between Harry and William remained fully intact. For months, Harry had said the UK was not safe enough for Meghan and the children. He argued that the security available to them was not enough, and until that changed, he would not bring his family there. He repeated that position in interviews, legal action, and public statements, making security the central reason this visit might never happen. Then Meghan and the children came anyway. They traveled, attended the reunion at Highgrove, and left without the added protection Harry had said was essential, without the armed security he had treated as non-negotiable, and without the exact arrangements he had long claimed were necessary to keep his family safe.
Finding their feet in completely new territory.
Harry is, can I say, with the greatest respect, is a bit of a loose cannon.
The visit happened, it ended, and nothing went wrong. A danger once described as serious enough to keep his family out of the UK altogether suddenly appeared manageable enough for a quiet stop during a European holiday. That contradiction was hard to miss. Commentators noticed it right away. Major media outlets did too. Even coverage that had generally been sympathetic to Harry struggled to ignore the gap between what had been claimed for months and what actually happened. That left the security argument in a difficult place. Either Harry had overstated the risk, or conditions had changed so much that a visit once described as impossible had become quietly workable. Neither explanation was easy, and critics of his security claims now had a very visible example to support their doubts. Some observers summed it up bluntly. He had backed himself into a corner. His options now seemed simple. He could quietly accept that the UK is, in fact, manageable for his family, or keep insisting it is unsafe, even though this trip has made that far harder to defend. There was also another important detail beneath all the noise. The Invictus Games are now 1 year away. It remains Harry's biggest ongoing public commitment, and alongside the growing focus on Diana-related projects and the wider question of whether he can still manage a major public role in the UK, this visit has made that issue even harder to avoid.
During a Q&A panel, how they honor Princess Diana on her birthday July 1st and the anniversary of her death.
Everything now points to the next 12 months. The security argument had to face reality sooner or later, and it did at Highgrove. What Harry does with that now is still unclear. The reunion also did not happen on its own. It came in the same week that Harry's legal fight against the Daily Mail came to an end, and the outcome was far from the victory he had long suggested was coming. The ruling stretched across hundreds of pages, and Harry succeeded on very little. A case presented as a major reckoning with the press ultimately weakened under close courtroom scrutiny. The journalists he had accused gave evidence and explained in detail how their stories had been obtained. The court did not find the kind of illegal methods Harry had repeatedly alleged. The claims he had made so confidently in public did not hold up against the evidence, and the judgment made that plain. Then came the cost. In the UK's loser pays system, a case of this size can create a very large bill. After pursuing lengthy legal action against a major national newspaper and failing to win in a meaningful way, Harry may now face major legal costs. The court case that was meant to bring vindication delivered the opposite, and at a high price. Meghan Kelly's broader point was hard to ignore. Suing journalists over unflattering coverage does not make the story disappear. It often gives it new life, puts it back in front of every outlet that covered it before, and gives the wider press a fresh reason to revisit it all.
Meghan gets to do a victory lap here because, to your point, she is back on royal property. And
Meghan Kelly's point went further. If the press already has plenty to write about, suing them is not a solution. It only adds fuel. The bigger issue is the pattern. Not just this case, but the long line of lawsuits, statements, and public claims built around the same idea. Harry is never at fault, never mistaken, and always the victim. That pattern was finally tested in court, and it failed. In the UK, failure in court also comes with a financial cost. So the ruling did more than end one case. It raised a harder question about what Harry does next. For years, he has built much of his public story around one central belief. The press is dangerous, the press cannot be trusted, and his fight with it is tied to what happened to his mother. That has been the emotional base of nearly everything he has said since leaving royal life. This week, that foundation started to crack. Princess Diana died in a car crash in a Paris tunnel in 1997. The driver was drunk and the car was speeding. Those facts have long been clear. It is also true that paparazzi were following the car, but they did not cause the crash. A drunk driver did. That difference matters. And Harry has often blurred it in a way that supports his story more than the full reality. Diana herself understood the press better than almost anyone in public life at the time.
Anniversary of her death, August 31st, Harry shares a simple and sweet answer, saying, "We do lemon."
Diana knew how the media worked. She knew how to attract photographers, place stories, use attention when it helped her, and manage it when it did not. She was not naive, and she handled that relationship more skillfully than most public figures. So the idea that she was only a helpless victim of the press is too simple to fully hold up. If Harry's campaign were truly focused on the actual cause of his mother's death, the clearest response would have been around road safety, drunk driving, or seatbelt awareness. Those were the real factors in the crash. Instead, his energy has largely gone into lawsuits, press battles, and arguments about media behavior. That is why the link to Diana's death can seem less about the facts of how she died and more about the emotional force her name still carries. The comparison between Diana's treatment by the press and Meghan's treatment by the press is where the argument becomes hardest to maintain. Diana remained tied to the monarchy through all of it. Her relationship with the institution was difficult, but she was never positioned against it in the way Meghan has been. That is a major difference, not a minor one. And the wider narrative which tries to connect Meghan's story to Diana's in order to borrow the emotional power of Diana's experience now stands out more clearly than ever. Once the word constitutional enters a royal story, the issue moves beyond family conflict and personal grievance into questions about the structure and stability of the institution itself.
Meghan was meant to be here this morning. Our assumption is that she's in the UK privately. She's here with the children.
Constitutional crisis is not a term serious people use casually, which is why it mattered when Vanity Fair royal editor Katie Nicole used it. She knows this story well. Harry even targeted her during his Daily Mail court case. So when she raised the issue on Piers Morgan, it was not a cheap headline. It was a serious warning from someone who has watched this unfold for years. The concerns she pointed to were specific and institutional. Harry's role as a counselor of state is now under open scrutiny. So is his continued place on the official royal family website. So is his position in the line of succession. These are not gossip points. They are formal parts of the royal system, and the question now is whether that system may soon have to deal with them directly. The Sandringham summit once looked like a major settlement over Harry and Meghan's future inside the royal structure. Now it feels like it belongs to another era. Whatever was agreed, or thought to have been agreed, has been tested again and again, and the gap between then and now is wide. What makes this harder is that the constitutional issue sits beside a personal one. Charles has long been the patient one, the one who kept the door open and tolerated a great deal without forcing a formal break. But more and more people are now asking whether even that patience has limits, and whether those limits are getting close.
With Prince Harry, that story came out in the court when, he couldn't remember, but he invited me into the party.
The Highgrove reunion reflected that same tension. Charles acted as both father and king, but in that moment he chose the personal over the institutional. He chose to see his son and grandchildren rather than draw a formal line. But constitutional questions do not stop just because a personal moment happens. They keep building. And the people focused on the monarchy's long-term stability no longer seem to view this as something that can simply be waited out. Questions about Harry's titles, his place in the succession, and his formal status within the royal structure are no longer remote possibilities. They are active and increasingly urgent issues. And whatever personal warmth came from the reunion, it did nothing to reduce that pressure. There is also a difference between a public figure having a rough period and a public figure becoming impossible to manage from the outside. The first can be handled by advisors. The second, PR expert Jackie Bohr argued, looks like a breakdown happening in public. She based that view on a clear pattern. First came a press leak suggesting the family was coming to the UK, which created headlines and expectation. Then came a very public reversal, with the security issue used as the reason it could not happen. After that, the visit went ahead anyway, quietly and without the extra protection that had earlier been described as essential. Her point was simple. That sequence does not look like the behavior of someone acting from a steady and consistent position.
And to my understanding, that the cancer treatment is actually going really well.
Right. He's doing some experimental stuff, doing amazing things.
The problem now looks bigger than bad strategy or poor communication. As Jackie Bohr noted, the instability has become so visible that even professionals who usually manage this kind of public story can no longer hide it. Several commentators reached a similar conclusion. Behind the scenes, Harry and Meghan seem to want very different things, and that tension is no longer staying private. It is now showing up in the contradictions, the reversals, and the gap between public statements and what actually happens. Harry is the public face of it. He is the one on camera, the one named in legal cases, and the one making the arguments. But the deeper strain appears to go beyond any one decision by him alone. The overall picture is of someone caught between competing pressures, with no clear resolution and no stable position to work from. The same pattern keeps repeating, one message, then another, one stance, then another. And with each cycle, the last one becomes harder to explain. Many close observers came away with the same view this week. This is not the end of the problem. The pressure is not easing. The contradictions are not being solved, and the people trying to manage the fallout are running out of room to contain it. In the end, The whole story keeps circling back to the same scene. A private room at Highgrove, a brief palace confirmation, a firm wall of silence around it, and a reported promise from Harry to his father before the visit took place.
They have been reunited, a special royal family reunion. King Charles with his grandchildren.
Harry reportedly promised he would say nothing publicly about what happened inside Highgrove. No statement, no selective leaks, no interview references, and no attempt to turn the meeting into proof of a bigger story. That matters because this was not a casual promise between people with full trust. It was a clear boundary, likely a condition of the visit itself. The fact that it had to be stated in advance shows exactly where trust stands between Charles and Harry. Strong enough for a private meeting, but not strong enough for silence to be taken for granted. That lack of trust comes with a long history behind it. Public interviews, the book, the documentary, and years of private family matters becoming public. Charles knows that history. The palace knows it. Harry knows it. And from the moment that promise was made, all of them would have known it was being quietly measured. For Charles, the reunion was still real and deeply important. His grandchildren were there with him, and that personal fact mattered regardless of everything else around it. But the meeting solved none of the larger problems. It did not undo the court defeat. It did not restore the security argument. It did not answer the constitutional questions. It did not heal the break with William. And it did not hide the wider sense of instability. All of those issues remained exactly where they were before Meghan and the children flew in from Europe and made the detour to Gloucestershire.
Less than 24 hours after a rare and private royal family reunion, Prince Harry attended.
This promise will either mark a real change or become one more promise that did not last. Time will show which it is. The heart of this story is that two truths can exist at once. Charles wanted to see his grandchildren, and after 4 years, despite the security disputes, legal fights, public claims, and all the tension in between, he finally did. He sat in the same room with Archie and Lilibet, and for him that clearly mattered on a deeply personal level beyond politics, strategy, or palace calculations. But the other truth remains. The court case fell apart. The security case lost force. The Diana-based argument looks weaker the more closely it is examined. The constitutional questions are no longer sitting in the background. Serious people are now raising them openly. PR experts are no longer talking about a rough patch but a visible breakdown, and William made his own position clear by being somewhere else entirely. Both realities are true at the same time. A meaningful family moment happened, and the bigger crisis around it did not go away. The reunion was never going to fix years of damage. What it really did was restart the clock. Now the key question is not the titles, the line of succession, or even the constitutional debate. It is whether Harry keeps the promise he made to his father.
I think Harry still thinks he's got that leverage over him. I honestly think that he still thinks he can, pull.
The full impact will become clear with time. But the promise matters now because it is personal and important. Everyone knows what it would mean if Harry keeps it and what it would mean if he does not. The reunion happened, but the problems around it are still there. The real story now is not the reunion itself, but what comes next and who shapes that next chapter. No one can predict whether Harry will keep the promise he made to Charles. Not the palace, not his inner circle, and not the people who have followed this story for years. Everything else has some history or pattern behind it. This promise does not. Once that question is answered, the rest could shift with it, including the constitutional issues, titles, line of succession, and Harry's relationship with William. All of it may depend on whether that private promise in Gloucester holds. The reunion story ended when the palace released its statement. What matters now is whether Harry keeps the silence he promised and whether the public breakdown gets worse before anyone can stop it. This story is still developing, and the next update could arrive sooner than anyone expects. If you want to stay informed as new details emerge, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future coverage. Every update will focus on the facts, the context behind them, and what they could mean. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe this reunion marks a genuine turning point, or is it simply another chapter in a familiar cycle? Join the conversation, and we'll be back with the next update as soon as there is more to report.